And Breezy, when some of the dynamics and the situation you were dealing with in your marriage became known to friends and family, what were some of the reactions or responses that really felt supportive? And what were some of the things that might have made you feel more isolated or misunderstood in that process?
So for me, it's actually interesting because people around me actually realized what was going on about my abuse in my marriage well before I did. So my parents realized it because they actually saw him doing things to my siblings who are all younger than me. So my parents actually took it upon themselves. They had to protect my siblings, and then they also had to create kind of a safe space for my kids to know that, Bobby and Zaidi have their back and they have somewhere to run to. But as far as like my friends, when I, finally came to terms with it, I think most, you know, survivors of abuse, we know what's going on. We're just not ready to either admit it, face the facts. We don't want to be told about it. So you can't go over to somebody and say like, "Oh, I know," or "I saw," or "I figured that out." It's more about creating like a zero judgment zone and letting them talk and letting, listen, because it takes a lot of courage to leave. And if you're questioning them, it's interesting because Robert Grayjower said about information seekers. And I feel like in abuse situations, there's also a lot of that. Everybody wants to gossip. Everyone wants to be a yenta. Um, and I think that in, my situation and a lot of other people's situations, when you do that, you're reliving the abuse. So you kind of get more worked up and more upset, and you want to be validated, and you don't want to be questioned because your abuser used to question you all the time. So when you're telling the story over to your friends, because a lot of survivors actually do feel very comfortable talking about their story just to any random person on the street. Um, but they just need to be validated. They just need to be heard and listened to and said, "I'm so sorry," or "I can't believe that happened to you," or "That's crazy," because everybody thinks that, my own horror.
That's really powerful. And I'm going to pull out that phrase of the no judgment zone, the people that can listen without bringing so much of their own stuff to the table. And before I keep going with more questions, Ronnie, Rabbi Grayjower, Breezy, anything else you want to add or respond to some of what's been said already? No pressure, but want you to have the space. And so I'm going to go to you next, Ronnie. We often default to let me know if you need anything, and I will confess I am totally guilty of this. Why is this phrase usually ineffective, or I guess is it effective first? And if it's not effective, why? And what are some alternatives that we can keep in our back pocket?
So let me know if you need anything comes from a really caring place, but it often doesn't land with the other person the way we hope or intend for it to. When a person's going through a tough time, they're usually overwhelmed, exhausted, sometimes even unsure of what they need. They may feel like they, can't do basic tasks, don't know what to do first, what to do next, which way is up, which way is down. And so putting the responsibility back on them to figure out what they need and then ask for that help may just be too much of a burden to place on them, especially when they're in this state. So in a way, it's asking them to do the emotional labor at a time when they actually have the least capacity to take on anything else. So your question is meant to help, but in reality, it's just placing another thing on their plate for them to do or figure out. So what tends to be more helpful is being specific and making the support you're offering concrete. So you know, we tend to say things like, let me know if you need anything in passing, right? Like, well, did you really mean it? Am I supposed to call you? Like, are you available now? Or, maybe next week? So, instead of putting the burden on them and making like a general offer, I would say, try really concrete things like, I'm going to the grocery store this afternoon. Can I pick up a few things for you? If so, what? right? Like, I have some time this week. You want company? Or would it be more helpful if I took something off your plate? What would driving carpool be helpful? Can I make some returns for you? I'm thinking of you. Can I check in a couple of days again to see how you're doing, right? These really specific things that we're offering or we're recognizing and we're asking for permission. So we're not taking agency or choice away. We're offering something concrete, useful that they can then say yes or no to. It's not about doing something huge, it's about making it easier for them to say yes and making something in their lives a little bit more easy when they're going through such a challenging time. The more specific and low effort we make the offer, the more likely it is to feel supportive and the more likely it is that they'll take us up on it. So
I
those are
love that. It's kind of like the idea of coming with a problem versus a solution. That in a way, coming with, hey, let me know if you need anything, it's you're putting it on them. Where if it's that specific piece, it's a lot easier. They don't have to do the thinking like, oh, would it be helpful to have cleaning help once a week? Let me think about that. There's a more
well,
specific
also
ask.
leaving it so open-ended also may make them feel like, well, can I really ask for this? Is my friend really okay or prepared to give me what I need, right? And as the giver, being able to be very clear about what you're offering and what your boundaries are and what you can do and what you can't do makes the recipient feel like they actually can accept rather than feeling like they're going to ask and then be let down again.
Right. So that element, if I'm saying, can I bring some desserts for you this Shabbos, that's concrete and you can say yes or no, but it's so specific that I'm presumably willing and able to bring desserts to you this Shabbos. That is something that is doable.
Can
I
I?
love that. Please jump on
Yeah,
in.
no, I just wanted, I think that the way Ronnie framed that in the beginning about giving them more work, it was very profoundly said because I think that's exactly like when you're feeling so overwhelmed, that piece. I would just if I could add like everything she
Please.
said exactly and just add three components. One is to be creative, meaning I think the can help can I do anything for you is I don't want to say it's not genuine. It's genuine in that you want to help the person, but you haven't given it more than a second thought, other than let me know if there's anything I could do,
It's
which
like
is
saying, how are you today? And not really
I was
expecting
just
someone
thinking
to
that.
respond with, well, I'm
exactly
actually not doing so well, right? Like it's asking a question, but it doesn't really feel like you want a response.
exactly. So I found that some people, and these weren't even necessarily good friends, had a certain creativity in their request that like they actually thought about it for more than a second. Like, oh, like Wednesday is gonna be this thing for in school. Like, can I get your kids a costume for the event? You know what I mean? Like that's like, oh wow, actually, yeah, that would be amazing because I'm not gonna go to Party City to get a costume. You know what I mean? Like those things were actually like very helpful when people were creative. Again, every situation is different. The second thing that I would add is that there are times where again I guess everyone is different and I want to be sensitive to boundaries, but even sometimes not even asking, but kind of not stating aggressively, but like, hey, like picking up pizza for my family, I'm gonna pick you up a pie too, right? And that doesn't have to be, you could say no thanks. I'm not gonna I don't need it. You could say that, but often I found that like when people did that and again in a kind way, not in like a shoving it in your face way, or like some people I feel like left things at the door, like hey, like boy piece of pizza, I'm gonna leave it at the door. Um, so that was helpful. And the third thing that again that Ronnie said I think is very helpful also is that again people, at least for me in my situation, but like I think in general, you don't necessarily want you don't want to feel like a nebuch. You don't want to feel like the chesed case. You don't want to feel like the person who's the recipient. It's very uncomfortable to be the recipient. So, what just one thing that I would add, I always tell this story, so I'll just say that there was a girl in my community that was my student, and she was like a ninth grade girl. It was like the sweetest thing. I had three little kids when my wife passed away, and she texted me on an Erev Shabbos saying like, "Hey, like, can I come over on Shabbos to like watch your girls?" And I said, so sweet, like, no, thank you. She texted me for seven Erev Shabbos in a row, 7 weeks in a row. She texted me, a ninth grade girl. hey, I would love to come watch your girls on Shabbos. So by the seventh time, I was just like, you know what? Like, I can't like keep saying no. I feel bad. And it was like amazingly helpful. Like she was incredible. She ended up coming for like a year after that, like every Shabbos. But like, so sometimes people think that like the first no is like never ask again. And I learned that people who like ask a few times, and again in a nice way, soft way, a gentle way, but like offer it and genuinely like sometimes you just don't want to take. And like once you are willing to give the yes, then you feel much better. Like even like you saying like, can I come over to hang out? No, I'm not in the mood tonight. And you ask 5 times in a row, then maybe they'll say, you know what, now, come over, and then they'll feel good that they gave a yes.
I think I remember actually you sharing that story, I believe on a podcast, and it being so powerful because again, it's so creative, it's so specific, and there's something I think so beautiful about that just showing up in this really simple way. And it really speaks to the what to say, what not to say, that we can't fix these things. And sometimes that's overwhelming, right? Because we want to fix it and we can't fix it. And yes, like a lasagna on Wednesday is not going to magically make this not a problem or not a crisis. And yet there is something I think really holy in these very small, specific, consistent, indications of support that really make a difference. And for us as community members and friends and family, not to feel overwhelmed by the magnitude and that idea of get creative and get specific. What is like one little thing that I could do? And I love the costume example as well. I will say, even not in a crisis, I am often like, oh my gosh, wait, what? It's, Yom Yarok tomorrow. Okay. And so being able to just take that off someone's plate is really such a specific and thoughtful thing to do. And while we're on this, Breezy, anything you want to add in terms of just shows of support that were helpful or, because I think we're giving people creative ideas.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing is that at night after the kids went to bed and I was alone in a house or an apartment hearing noises and it was scary and I'd never really been alone with the kids. Um, I love, I had a few friends that would always call me and be like, hey, what's going on? You want to watch TV over the phone together or stuff like that? And then I also had one really good friend. She would always call me. Um, she would call me every single time something happened where she had to ask her husband to help her out. She would think of me like every time she'd be like, she had to go run out to the store to grab something, but somebody needed to watch her kids. She would wait for her husband. So she would always say to me, hey, I'm running out to the supermarket. You need something. Or I'm running to CVS or wherever it is. Or it just made me feel seen or heard because a lot of times at 8 o'clock at night, that's when you remember you need something. So it was really helpful, for me in a lot of ways.
I love that. And again, that it can be these simple things. Let's watch TV together on the phone, you know? And again, it doesn't fix anything, but it makes such a difference in helping people feel a little less alone while they navigate what they're navigating. So I think that's beautiful. And I'll actually go to you one more time, Breezy, with another question. But as someone who really is a victim's advocate and you now hear a lot of other stories, how do you think of your role now that you're kind of in that supportive person role? What are some of the things that you really try to emphasize when you're speaking to someone who's in it and, needs that support?
So I'm actually going to steal something that Ronnie said to me that is like my favorite thing in the entire world to say. So Ronnie, when I met her over a year ago, she said she was speaking to the crowd and she said that she always uses the word survivor of abuse and not victim of abuse because it changes the psychological mindset of a person. And I think to me that is so incredible because it really is. Like I always tell people you have to fake it till you make it. You have to smile every day through because it's hard, but the more you fake it, the more it'll actually become your natural response to things. And so that's like one of my favorite things every time when somebody will come over to me. And I think it's different because I'm coming from a place of somebody who's gone through it. So I feel like I get a little bit more leeway for criticism to say it to them. When they'll be like, I'm a victim, I'll be like, no, 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 you're a survivor. Acknowledging it and making that first step now makes you a survivor, not a victim. Um, and a lot of people are very comfortable in the victim role. It's an identity of theirs that they've had for so long that to break out of it and to have to take now ownership of whatever happened in their life to them or their kids or their family, you have to go look in the mirror and be like, I, for whatever reason, tolerated it or accepted it. So now people who are survivors, a lot of them beat themselves up. They feel guilty. They feel horrible. They feel bad. And they just need that reminder of, okay, yes, it was, but you know what? You're taking the first step. And I think the best thing my parents did really was get me an incredible therapist, um, and an incredible lawyer, and an incredible support system, because your friends can't help you with every answer to every question. But having like, that's why like I love Shalom Task Force from my own experience, just because there was someone to reach out to and get some advice and suggestions. And now people will call me sometimes, and as much as I'm an advocate, I don't have all the answers. So I'll say, call Shalom Task Force. Like there's, somebody else. But I think that um, victims have never been heard or seen. Um, and they want to be heard and seen. And that's why a lot of them get very loud with telling their stories. One of the things also that I remember the first time I spoke for Shalom Task Force years and years ago, they we were talking and they said to me, trying to remember exactly how they said it to me, but they were basically saying that to leave the relationship is one of the hardest things. And it's the scariest. And people will leave up to 7 times before they actually leave. There's usually that like aha moment that will make them leave. But they're so broken that it's so hard to like refine themselves again. So it's really just being gentle with them and their words and just listening.
I think that's very powerful. And the theme I'm pulling out here is also the shame that we can feel. And even when we're going through something that, 1,000 people could tell you is not your fault, shame is part of a lot of hard things that we go through, and it makes that support even more important. And I also appreciate how the framing is so different. You can have the same story, but you call it one thing, you call it something else. It changes how we feel about it, the way we frame our stories and each other's stories and kind of project that back really makes a difference. And I will now I'll go back to you, Ronnie. And my question here, and there's actually some great comments in the chat I want to pull out also when we get to Q&A, but how do we help a friend navigate a challenge without kind of removing their agency? How do we make sure that we're finding that balance where if someone we love is in a situation, we're concerned, we think they're unsafe, we think they're not doing the right thing or following the right strategy to get themselves out of it? What are some of the ways that we can find that balance with friendship and also not overstepping?
So I often think about a friend of mine who is going through a really difficult situation, and my instinct was to jump in with solutions. Again, like many of us who are fixers in aspects of our life feel very comfortable as a fixer or as a solutions focused, friend, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, what they should do, how they should fix it. And I remember this friend gently saying to me, I just need you to sit with me in this. Brene Brown has a beautiful short video clip about empathy, that I always recommend to people if like they want to see what empathy is in a visual. We see a couple of clips of it in the movie. Oh my God, I'm having a senior moment. The Disney Pixar movie about the emotions. Why can't I remember it right now?
Inside
Inside Out.
Inside Out,
I'm
yes,
also going to pop a link to it in the
with
chat because
sadness.
it's really good.
Um, and it really stayed with me because it highlights how easy it is to take over when what someone needs is to feel in control of their life again. Very often, when people are in challenging situations, it's because of what is happening to them and not necessarily what is within their control. And so, being able to give them back opportunities to find that control and to have their voice and to make choices and to have agency is treating them in the exact opposite way of what their circumstance are is, whether it's because they're in an abusive relationship and there is a person actively, trying to control or maintain power over them, or whether it's because there's a situation happening that like we have no control over. My loved one has a terminal illness and is passing away, and I can't do anything, right? So like, where can I find that control? And in approaching a friend and not trying to fix it for them, but being with them in it is a really small way to not be part of the problem that they're in and to actually be a part of the healing. So now when I think of support, I think of it more as like walking alongside a person and not as much steering of a person. I think sometimes again, when people are going through something and they're living through this place of exhaustion and overwhelm and brain fog, I've had rabbis say to me, well, maybe they just don't know what they should do or need to do. And like they need you to tell them that so like they can see it for themselves. And I try and present it in a way where like my job isn't to drive the car. My job might be to like be a GPS support, right? Like I might say, well, we could do this or we could do that, or have you thought about this and what about that? And kind of help brainstorm possibilities if they're in a place where like they can't really access those cognitive abilities, but like want that type of support. But I think again, asking, right? Like, do you want me to just listen or help you think through options? What feels like a next step that makes sense for you? And when there's safety involved, it gets more complex, but the same principles apply. Do you want to stay you want to stay calm, not judge, potentially offer small practical options? Do you have a safe place you can go if you need to? Would it help to make a simple plan together? Can I get, can I find a phone number of someone for you to reach out to and speak through this with, right? Like you're supporting their safety without taking control away from them, which that part about taking control away from them can actually possibly increase their risk. And if there's immediate danger, it's okay to involve outside help, but be transparent about it, because that will help preserve the trust and the relationship which the person really needs at a time like this. So at the end of the day, I say it's not about taking over, it's about helping someone feel more steady in their own next step.
I love that. There's an old camp song that Fear Not Everyone. I'm not going to start singing, but that don't walk in front of me, I may not follow, and don't walk behind me, I may not lead, and just walk beside me and be my friend. And I think sometimes that's what people need the most, and it's a hard thing to do actually. We like to go in front or behind and kind of get in a line, and that element of the side by side and that I also love that idea of we can offer almost like a menu. Here are some of the options on
Chinese
the menu.
menu. I'm
Yes,
not
and you get
telling
to
you do this,
choose.
but like, here are all your choices. And
Right,
there's
here's the
probably
options
more
on the
that,
menu, and if you want to go order from someone else somewhere else, that's fine
you know,
too.
at the end
A
of the
low pressure
day,
menu.
we're well-meaning, but we go to sleep, friends go to sleep at night in their own bed. I, as a therapist, go to sleep at night in my own bed. So if I were to tell somebody what to do and they listened and it went sideways or it was harmful or they weren't prepared to live with the consequences of what right? Like they're the ones who have to live with that, not me. And so putting myself in a position, right, of like what Rabbi Great Jarrah said before, like we are equals. It is not I am God. It is not I am a psychic. I do not know. I cannot assume. And I don't have to live with the ripple effects of these choices, right? So, like being very mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, You're going back to your life and they have to live with their life. They have to be okay with the choices that they make.
And
Absolutely.
I, sorry, one thing that you
Please come on in, Breezy.
one thing that Ronnie that I think is very important is one of the reasons I love doing these kinds of talks is because when people ask me questions, Ruch Hashem, you don't know what a bad, unhealthy marriage looks like. You don't know what a dangerous situation is. I used to sleep with my kids as babies in my bed, in my arms, which is very dangerous. But I did that because I knew that was the only way that I can keep my kids safe from what was going to go on at night. And that I knew that I had that safety and security. And my ex was kind of scared that he would roll over the babies. That's how I kept us safe. So most people don't understand that and don't know that. So you can't really tell your friend what to do. I think also what I mentioned before is people leave 7 times on average before they actually leave for good. And something that was also said to me the first time I spoke with Shelton Task Force is most of the times when you hear in the news about an abuse situation, it's because the victim didn't make it out alive or it ended up in the newspapers. So you can't tell somebody to do something that might end up that way, especially if you're not a professional. And I also think that because abusers tend to be really nice sometimes. So I know that people used to say to me, like, I can't imagine your ex doing those things. He did them because he put on that facade outside and then inside he was a different person. But then there were also days when he was really good. So I would say to him, hey, yo, I had a conversation with this and this friend because, they were biased for Shabbos and they saw something and they were kind of nervous. So, like, next time they come, like, can you just not say that or do that in front of them? Because my friend said something to me. I never saw that friend again. That friend got cut out of my life so fast. I didn't speak to them until after I got separated because my ex realized right away this is somebody who's going to ruin what I have. So by reaching out to your friend and saying something to them, it's really hard because you're going to put yourself in a position where you might actually get cut off from them permanently because of where they're living in. I think also for my situation, I couldn't call the cops. My ex was working at a job that he would have lost if he ever had a criminal record. And he knew because of what he was making at the time, he's like, she's never going to call the cops. In the end, I did because I didn't care anymore about the money and I didn't care about any of that. I just cared about my kids' safety and making sure that we got out of it alive. Um, but a lot of people that I know that have called the cops multiple times or ended up in the hospital or are gone the next day, they'll give their friends copies of the police reports or the hospital records to hold on to. Because where else are you going to keep a copy of that? You can't bring it into your house. And I think people ask me to do that for them a lot also. I will hold on to paperwork, things of value, of importance. I had somebody who came to me, they're like, he's, selling stuff off to try to do X, Y, and Z. So I think that if somebody comes to you and asks for help, you can help, but to reach out on your own, it's very, very tricky.
I think part of the theme in all of this and really across situations is that people are the experts on their own stuff. And I will say, for example, I've experienced infertility personally, and I'm pretty open about it. And I think as with infertility, with other medical issues, people love to tell you about some like treatment they read about on the internet that you should totally try because it worked for like their great grandmother's, dog walker, and it's going to work for you too. And that element of giving people the space to, not that we can't share ideas. Certainly in safety situations, we do have to be thoughtful about how we do that. And I will say Shalom Task Force, along with many other DV resources, but you can call us and we can work with you on how to do that safely because we know that that's really hard. But that element of trusting people to be the experts on their lives and their situations and giving them that room and kind of coming in to some extent where we're invited and staying out of the spaces that we're not. And I think part of why we need to have these conversations is that this is really hard. It's easy to get wrong. It's not so easy to get right. And it takes a lot of sensitivity and, really learning from others to figure out, okay, the next time there's a crisis in my community or that impacts someone that I love, what am I going to do? And if I can shift to you, Rabbi Greyjour, I'd I'm curious if you have thoughts on how do we talk to someone in grief without getting into but let's look at the bright side of this, or some of the platitudes that we might offer. Are those ever helpful? Are they not helpful? How do we think about the things we say when something really big and really hard is happening?
Sure. So, I think that one of the hard things when even when you're in a situation, this is hard, but certainly when you're not in the situation, is to realize that it's not going to be like this forever. And like a friend who is, struggling right now, or sounds are struggling right now, or is in pain right now. I think that one thing is also just to realize like it's not going to be like this forever. Is like a helpful thought. Again, as a friend for yourself, not to say to them, but I'm saying to realize for yourself, like my friend who's saying certain things, like let's say, for example, people are saying strong religious statements, like I hate God, how could God do this to me, things like that. Again, in the moment when the emotions are very high, so we want to, we're hearing it with a certain like, oh my gosh, my friend's becoming not religious, as opposed to just like they're feeling intense emotions right now. And, I think one is just to frame in your head that like, it's not gonna be like this, forever, to me is like, a helpful thing as a friend. I do think just I know like I'm echoing Breezy's words, even though I cannot understand at all what she went through. I have no understanding of what Breezy went through. I never experienced anything like it. And Breezy doesn't know what I went through and can't think about what I went through. And I think that like the Baruch Hashem, you've never been through this. Something that I think all the time. I think often like a well-intended friend, I'll just say like in general, because I think sometimes in these talks it makes it feel like, okay, shoot, I can't say anything because I'm never going to be able to say the right thing. Like sometimes well-intending friends say the wrong things because they don't know, and they're good people who have like, who have good hearts, who want to say the right thing. They just, we say the wrong thing sometimes. And I guess I'm just like validating the friend for a second. Like you don't know, like there are times where I had friends say the wrong thing. And I was just like, okay, Baruch Hashem, they don't know what this is, and they have no clue what they're saying, and they're saying things that are actually not helpful. But like, okay, like, like, it's not always. I just want to like, it's not always like that night I'm like, I can't believe he said that, sometimes just like, okay, he doesn't understand what I'm going through, and therefore but I think that it just making like it's a kind of a cliche, but like being able to like make space for the pain and let people feel the pain is usually going to always be the healthiest route. When you try and push aside pain or ignore pain, so it comes out in all the wrong ways. And if you let your friend and make them comfortable and safe to be in pain with you, so again, there's like the simple answer is like that's the best thing to do. Like let them be in pain and be with them. I think what Ronnie was saying about mirroring their emotions is like if that's like literally everything in all interpersonal relationships. Mirroring someone's emotions is really helpful. So the same way that like when a little kid comes up to a parent and says, oh, I just stubbed my toe, so if you're like, it doesn't hurt, go back, so that doesn't really help them. If you say, oh, you stubbed your toe, and then like they're fine 5 seconds later because they realize that. So obviously adults are a little more complicated than little children, but I think there is something very real of just making space for the pain and validating it. And that that's often, the solve. There's a great cartoon. I don't know how fast, Kesha, you seem to get links really fast, but there's a great cartoon of like a friend who's like, the person who's like in pain is talking, and the person is like thinking like, what should I say? What should I say? And then they keep talking, and then they're like, I don't know what to say. I can't add anything. And then they keep talking, and then they didn't, they're still thinking like, I have nothing to add to this conversation. Then by the end, the person who's in pain is like, thank you so much. This was so helpful. Like, you just don't say anything. Just sit there. You know what I mean? Like, and when you just listen, it's like honestly the best medicine is just being able to sit and listen, and you don't have to say anything. And then you think you have to add it to something, you don't have to add anything. Just listen and listen and listen more and nod and say, yeah, I hear you, whatever. And then a half hour later the person feels much better.
That's really beautiful. And not to bring up Brene Brown for the second time in one evening, but we could do a lot of Brene Brown, but she has this, I think, another short video. I'll see how quickly I can pull it up. But that talks about how a good rule of thumb in some ways is that most empathic statements don't begin with at least. That usually when we're at leasting, we're trying to sort of like shift away from the pain. And that has helped. And I have absolutely said things that as they're coming out of my mouth, I'm like, oh no. And so I think that validation as well, that we're trying, and that humanity, and the idea of the humanity everywhere, that we as friends and supporters want to do everything we can to be that warm, supportive safe presence for the people we love that are struggling, and that element of also recognizing that people are doing their best and that sometimes we don't know what to say or things come out the wrong way or we just don't have the frame of reference to know how hurtful something lands. And so
Yeah, should I
I
think
think
also like as the friend and as the supporter, being able to own that and say that, like I heard this coming out of my mouth and then I pretend that I didn't say it versus I say, "Oh my God, I can't believe that came out of my mouth. I'm so sorry. I realize how that must have come across. I can't imagine what, right? Like being able also as the friend to own, like sometimes I am going to screw up because I am human. And I'm sorry if I say things that hurt you, even if it's unintended, but I'm going to do better, right? I'm going to try and do better and I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to keep trying to do better because I am human. And so kind of owning that ourselves of like, I'm not going to be perfect, but I can own up when I stick my foot in my mouth. And like, even just that kind of builds and bridges the relationship.
that's so beautiful. I will say when I was in the throes of infertility treatments, I remember a friend saying once, sometimes I'm not sure if I should bring it up or not because I don't want to bring it up and make you sad, but I also don't want you to think that I've just forgotten about it. So tell me what I should do. Like, is it good for me to bring it up? Is it better for me not to? Should I wait for you to? And I still remember that conversation years later. And there's something powerful about being able to ask, and especially with those really close friends, to be able to talk about what's working and what's not working and what's landing and what isn't landing. And that we can, when we really care about each other, we can figure that out together as we go. And speaking of which, I think one of the real challenges of supporting people through challenging times is that we don't stay static as we go through it, that as things change and as we change, what works and doesn't work might also change. And so, if I can start with you, Breezy, and share any thoughts you have about as your own journey progressed, did what you need change and how did you navigate helping the people in your life support you when the facts on the ground are not the same, from one day to another day?
So I think that for me at least, one of the big things is that as I was going through my legal journey and my divorce journey, and everything was kind of happening at once, I different things would pop up. I think also one of the things that's different between me and Rabbi Greyjour is that he's now alone and he didn't have a spouse anymore and he didn't have somebody that he loved and cared for. Whereas for me, I was trying to get rid of somebody that I was scared of and fearful of, and they're still around. And legally, they still have ties to the kids, and legally, they're still allowed access and conversations. And I'm trying to defend myself. So it's a very different struggle depending on where you are in your divorce and separation process and what happens. And um, I mean, I know a lot of people who still have to deal with their exes and their abusers, and they're going to probably have to deal with them when they become grandparents and stuff. So it's learning that. I think that one of the biggest things that that my parents tell me was getting a really great therapist, and my therapist said, I'm going to give you the tools how to handle it. That way you don't need it, but like every once in a blue moon, check it. So like every, I don't know, 6 months or a year, and I've been separated, I've been divorced now 18 years, 19, almost 19 years. He'll just check in, be like, just want to make sure that like everything's okay. You don't need me. I'm all good. And I'll be like, yep, doing great. Thanks so much. Or sometimes I'll be like, nope, something came up and I don't know how to handle it. So I think that that's that reminder. It's also interesting because I've dated other people and I've gone through other relationships and stuff like that. And one of the things that I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said to me, they're like, "Well, I can promise I will always physically, like, I will always take care of you. I will always protect you." And I go, "Well, what does that mean to you?" And they're like, "I would take a bullet for you, and I love you." And I said, "I don't need the physical protection. I've gone through physical hell, and I know I could survive it, and be okay from it. I said, I need the emotional, support, and I need, the mental, psychological support. I said, that's what I need in a healthy relationship. because I've never had that. And I'm doing it on my own, and being with somebody is healthy. So I think that that's a lot of realizing what you need as you're progressing in your journey.
I love that. And that it evolves over the very long game. It's not a short-term process, but sometimes these are lifelong processes and our needs shift over time. And I'm curious if you can speak to that same question, Rabbi Greyjour, and also if I can add a little add-on. Sometimes communities show up in a very big way right in the very beginning, and that can shift over time. Was there anything that you found helpful in terms of kind of longer term support? How did you navigate that, adjusting what was supportive as time passes?
Yeah, so again, I guess I would speak on there's two parts of the question, and again, every just situation is going to be different, obviously. For me, when my wife passed away, I had three little kids. So I will be honest, most of the most helpful support was practically raising three children as a single father was extremely difficult on every level. Thank God I had a very supportive family and I had, very supportive friends, but I lived in Florida away from most of my family, and having support was extremely helpful. So on the practical level, again, my community really was amazing. I had people making me dinner for a long time. It was a long meal train. No, I had like two families that basically made me dinner basically like twice a week, every week. Which was really helpful. And again, Sundays and play dates and carpools and all that stuff, for the kids, was extremely helpful. I would say that the part that I do think is, again, it's hard to navigate because I think some people err one way too strong and some people the other too strong. 6 months, a year later. So I will say it's more about like the emotional support that does sometimes shift of like, again, like, and I don't say this in a funny way or in a cynical way, but it's like a little bit like on to the next are in the community, which is normal. There's a lot of people dealing with a lot of different things, and you are still dealing with your challenge, whatever that is. So I would say again on both extremes, I had some people that like I felt like they totally forgot, and like it was like, did you remember that, I lost my wife 6 months ago? And but it was also some people that I would still have this. Like I still have this. Baruch Hashem, I'm remarried, and it's been a lot of years. And not that there's no pain, but like it's just a very different stage of life right now. And I'll still have people come up with like the saddest, like they'll meet me and they know my story, and they'll be like, I'm so sorry about your loss. And I don't even know what, like now that I don't know what they're talking about. It's like very, it's like a little bit like again, it's the same thing. It's like over. I had someone like 2 summers ago, like bawling and crying to me. And obviously, it wasn't really about my pain. It was really about their own pain that was kind of being dumped on my pain. But again, I think that again, similar to the mirroring of mirroring in a lot of the relationships. Again, a lot of this stuff. To me, it boils down to the same thing, which is just like kind of reading the room and knowing, where your relationship with this person is, and knowing where the person is and trying to get a sense of that, and again, and feeling it out. I think that, like Kesha, the story actually you said, I think is very powerful. Kind of like, a good friend asking, where, are you, where are you holding a little bit, I'm saying, and I don't know the way to frame that exactly, but I think kind of getting a sense of where the person is holding and what's going on, and I think again, just what Breezy said is also very powerful, right? So, for me, it was like a loss of something that I missed, and for Breezy, the day of divorce was like the biggest celebration, and like we're finally out of this, and I think again, that's also reading the room, right? It's also reading the room of knowing, is this a something that like a divorce could seem like a very sad moment, and for some person could be a really happy moment, and it's reading the room and knowing, kind of knowing where the person is and really seeing them. That's what I would say. It's very easy to dump our own emotions onto other people as opposed to see like their emotions and what they're really feeling. So that's kind of, I guess, the feeling I would say.
That makes a lot of sense. And I will say I've spoken to many, many women on the day they get their get. And the range is really interesting. Some people are thrilled and it's like, I just won the lottery. And some people are really sad. And some people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect to be sad and I am sad. Like some people are surprised by the emotions that they're experiencing. And even within the same sort of type of crisis, people experience things really differently and their timeline might be different. And that element of before I jump in with my own stuff, let me read the temperature of where this person is at and what might be helpful.
Yeah, can I just one language, sorry,
Yeah.
on that point, because that actually what you said, Kesh, very important. People start sentence with "it must be." You must be feeling. I never like those sentences because you don't know what I'm feeling. Maybe I'm, exactly like you're saying, Kesha. A person could be leaving a really hard situation and still feel sad. So like, you must be really happy. Like, how do you know what I feel right now? The sentences that start with "you must be," I always find to be very presumptuous.
I love that. And I like these guidelines that we can keep in mind because I think they're so helpful. Go for it, Breezy.
Sorry. One thing that actually happened to me, a neighbor of mine down the block, Malky Hirsch, lost her husband very suddenly many years ago, kissed the kosher cook. And she's a very good friend of mine. And at the time, I was at the Shiva house with her every day, and I was talking to her. And she said to me, she goes, "I'm so happy that you're a few doors down, and you're a single mom, and you can help me because I've never been a single mom before, and I don't know how to do it, and whatever it was." And she didn't realize that at the time I was taking care of somebody who was terminally ill. And after Shiva, I went back to her and I said, "Malki, I love you." I said, "I just don't have in me to give you what you need because I'm trying to still take care of what's going on in my life right now." And her knee jerk reaction was, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't know." I said, "But I want you to know that I will come to you to help you whenever I can. But if I'm not showing up, it's not because I don't love you or I don't care. It's just because there's something going on in my life." And I think that if a close friend of yours is going on, you don't necessarily need to share what's going on, but I think you need to say, "Hey, listen, I can't be there for you." People didn't help me out or didn't come to me. They said, "I love you, and but things that you're going through are a trigger for me. So I can't be there the way you need. But if you like need that fun friend to go out with drinks with that night, or if somebody to go to a movie with, that I could do." And I'm like, "Okay, great." And it made me at least know that I wasn't alone and that they weren't abandoning me because of what I'm going through, that they wanted to be there, but they can only be there in the way that they were capable of. And this past week in the Five Times Jewish Times, there was a really great article written by Brad Burfus, and it was written just, discussing, widowers and divorcees and single people and what as the Jewish community. And one of the things that he said in it is that in Judaism, we're all about community. And once you become single, it is very hard to find your place in community. So I know for me, I had a son and I needed somebody to take my son to shul because my son, after a while, didn't want to sit with me in the women's section. Or I know that like he wanted to do father son learning, but he didn't have a father to take him. So I mean, I was lucky that my father stepped up at that moment, and then other friends' husbands stepped up. But you're not able to do everything and you need to. So one of the things that he said, and I want to quote him correctly, he goes, "There's no amount of tzedakah that can make someone feel connected when they feel abandoned and isolated. Only a person can bridge that gap." And I think that that's very important to remember, that even if you just reach out, like Rabbi Gridra, and we've all been saying that, even if you just reach out and that they know that they're not alone or they're being thought of, that alone is enough to make you feel something good.
I think that is so beautiful. And we have some great questions in the chat. Some of them that are more specific, I will really invite you to contact us. We're info@shalomtaskforce.org. Happy to discuss in more detail. Overall, though, I think a lot of the themes that have come out tonight that are also in these questions are really about allowing the person in the situation to take the lead and being there as that supportive and present player. So I hope that's helpful. And please do reach out because we're always happy to help navigate specific situations since they are so complex that it's hard to give a one-liner that really encapsulates all the pieces. But I want to invite each of our panelists to share a closing thought. Can I start with you, Ronnie?
So I don't think my closing thought is going to be anything new or, mind blowing. I think I'm just really going to repeat a lot of what we said here tonight. Um, if there's one thing I hope, the people who are watching tonight can take away, is that you don't have to be perfect to be supportive. you just have to be present. We've talked about how easy it is to try and fix things, to worry about saying the wrong thing or not knowing where the line is. But most people don't need or even want or expect perfect advice in hard moments. They really just need to be seen and heard and shown that they're not alone. And, a phrase we use is holding space or bearing witness. Um, Small, thoughtful actions like checking in, being specific, listening without trying to solve. Those are things that people remember most. It's okay not to have the answers. So if someone in your life is going through something difficult, don't overthink it. Just reach out, stay a little longer in the conversation, be willing to sit in the uncomfortable moments with them. You don't have to fix it. You just have to show up and stay, as Rabbi Greyjour said, to the extent that you were before.
I love that. And I love that. I feel like I need to get that embroidered on a pillow, but we don't have
Too
to
many
be
words for a
perfect.
pillow.
We have to be present. Perfect present. I think we have some pillow content to work on, but we will see. I'm Rabbi Greyjour. Can I go to you next?
I mean, I think she really summed it up perfectly. But the only thing it's not adding. I think I'm just repeating one thing she said. But is that don't do nothing. I think that's the one advice I always give when people say when their options or what's the wrong thing to do. I always say the only wrong thing to do is nothing. It could be as small as just texting someone. It could be as small as again, calling them to invite them for a shower meal, whatever the situation is, doing something, a helpful hand, a creative idea. The only thing I will say is the only wrong answer is doing nothing. There's never an answer that nothing, is the right answer. There's always something small. Again, it could be even whatever level of relationship you have, something small. There's always something you can do in the smallest level. So that's the only thing that I will add. But I think Ronnie really did sum it up perfectly. And I was also thinking that was a perfect quote to put on on some kind of platform. I think I'm going to use that one too. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. I like that.
I love that. And another gem here, do something. And I will say it is so important to be sensitive. And I love what you shared earlier, Ronnie, that we don't want to let that sensitivity in a way paralyze us and make us feel like I'm better off saying nothing. Better to show up in our imperfect human ways and do our best and learn from our mistakes than not show up at all. And last but not least, Breezy.
Um, Everybody gave like everything that I would have, thought or said, but I think that I always appreciated when I was talking to a friend and they would say to me, okay, do you need me to listen or do you want practical advice? And I love that they would like give me that option because some friends I really wanted practical advice because they, whatever their career was could have helped me versus some of them I just wanted them to listen and, just hold me. Um, One of my close friends, she would just text me like every other day, just, I love you, I'm thinking of you, I'm here, you're on my mind. And that to me just made me feel not alone. Because how many times do any of us think of somebody in our life, whether even if it's a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, and we don't text them? So somebody who's going through something hard, if you just reach out, it just means something.
I love that. And I will say, first of all, just a deep thank you to all of our panelists. I learned so much, and this was such a really important conversation. And thank you for bringing your experiences, your lived experiences, your professional experiences, and really adding to this conversation. And part of what I'm walking away with is that, in a way, our lives can be very different from each other. And even tonight, the hard things that we're talking about are different. They're not the same hard thing. And we've talked about where they're different. But I think it is this core human experience that we will all have times in our lives where it's hard and we're down and we need support. And we will all have times in our lives where we're in a position to offer that support. And that element of not seeing it as a nebach or, to quote the Southern expression, a kind of bless your heart situation, that we're all there sometimes. And we also all have the opportunity to be there for each other. And the more we can recognize that and really aim to do for others what we want, when we are in a moment where we need that love and support from our friends and our community, the better off we are. So I want to thank you all so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining. To those of you watching, if you do need support with a domestic abuse specific concern, you can always find us on the Shelburne Task Force website. And thank you again to all of our speakers tonight for sharing just the range of experiences. And may we all be able to be sources of light and support and kindness to the people around us. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful night.